This is the story of Anansi and the Turtle, a folk tale from Ghana. One day Anansi the spider picked some yams from his garden. They were extra beautiful yams, so he baked them carefully in the fire. Then he sat down to eat them up. Just as Anansi was about to put the first bite in his mouth, he heard a knock on the door. Oh no, thought Anansi, who can that be? But he opened the door. There was Turtle, who looked very tired. Turtle said, "Please, Anansi, I've walked so far today and I'm so tired and hungry." So what could Anansi do but let him in? Anansi was too selfish to share his beautiful, delicious yams with anybody else, so he came up with a nasty plan. Just as Turtle sat down at the table and began to reach for some yams, Anansi yelled at him, "Turtle, your hands are all dirty. You can't eat with your hands all dirty. Go wash them." Turtle's hands really were dirty, so he slowly crawled to the river, washed his hands, and crawled back. But meanwhile, Anansi had started gobbling up the yams. By the time Turtle was back, he saw that the yams were all gone. Turtle looked at Anansi. "Thank you for inviting me to dinner. If you're ever near my house, please come by and let me return the favour," said Turtle. And Turtle began crawling slowly away to his house. As time went by, Anansi began to think more and more about how Turtle had promised to feed him a free dinner. So one day he walked over to Turtle's house. Anansi got to Turtle's house just about dinner time, as the sun was going down over the river. Turtle was lying on a rock in the sun, warming himself up, as turtles do. When Turtle saw Anansi, he said, "Hello there, Anansi. Have you come to have dinner with me?" And Anansi said, "Yes, that would be very nice, thank you." He was getting hungrier and hungrier, so Turtle dived down to the bottom of the river to set the table for dinner and get everything ready. Anansi waited on the rocks by the shore. Soon Turtle swam back up and said, "Oh, Anansi, it is all ready now. Please join me for dinner." And Turtle dived down again and began to eat the green leaves he had for dinner. Anansi tried to dive down to the bottom of the river, but he was a spider, not a turtle, and he couldn't dive that deep. He kept floating back up to the surface again. He tried jumping in, he tried diving in, but nothing helped. He just couldn't get down to that dinner. Finally, Anansi had an idea. He put lots of stones in the pockets of his coat, and finally he was heavy enough to sink down to the bottom of the river. How clever he was! He saw Turtle's table full of juicy green leaves and lots of other delicious food. But just as Anansi was reaching for some of that delicious food, Turtle stopped him. "Anansi, surely you're not going to eat dinner with your coat on? That's not how we do things at my house." Anansi, without thinking, said, "Oh, of course you're right, Turtle. What was I thinking?" He took off his coat. But without the rocks in his pockets to hold him down, Anansi floated right back to the surface of the river again and popped out of the water. Anansi sadly put his head down into the water and watched Turtle eat up all of the delicious food. And that was the end. Do you think Anansi learned a lesson? What lesson do you think he learned?